This is the pattern for the Flat Front Pouch Bikini, and the reason I call it a flat front is because here in the front, instead of having a seam all the way up to the waistline, we actually have, it's going to be cut on the fold, so the top of that is not going to have a seam. However, the front pouch just below it is kind of fun. It's actually a contoured pouch, gives a little bit more fuller fit for you. One thing that I want to let you know about is that this pouch is engineered so that any size that you choose for the pouch will actually fit into the front. So say, for example, if you're a size medium and you cut this upper part of the front out in a medium, but say you're a large or extra large pouch, that size pouch will actually fit right in here regardless of the size of the pouch, and it will also fit back in here to the back of it. So it's the first pattern I've done like this where we have interchangeable pouches. I'm trying to start designing some of things like that, similar to women's bra sizes. So not everyone is built equally, so I just decided I'd give this a try and see how you like it. So be aware that maybe if you need a different pouch size, it will always fit into this pattern for this. So we're gonna cut this, the front on the fold, the upper front on the fold, and then of course here I have the back, which is also cut on the fold. Again, seam allowances are 1/4 inch all the way around, with the exception of the elastic at the waist is going to be 3/4 inch or 3/4 inch wide elastic. And then for the leg openings here, we're going to be using 3/8 wide elastic here. So, and again, these arrows here on here are, we're going to put these on the greatest stretch of the fabric, which is usually the width of the fabric. So selvage to selvage or side of the fabric to side of the fabric. We want these arrows to go across between those. So I have 2 fabrics that I'm going to be using. I'm going to color block this. So the main body of the suit is going to be the white, and then the pouch is going to be this lovely neon pink color. So we'll see how that turns out. Also, I'm going to fully line this. So I'm going to be using a Helenka lining, and it's white. Of course, you can find this in nude or black if you like. So those are the fabrics that I'm going to be using, and I'm going to be lining the entire thing. It's up to you whether you line your suit or not. It's always generally a pretty good idea to line the pouch. That helps with any kind of chafing. You don't want that to happen. As well, I'm also going to enclose all of the seams. Now you don't have to do that, but I'm going to do that for those of you who would like to have all of the seams enclosed. If you don't enclose the seams, all you just need to do is just make sure you have your lining, and then you'll just sew your seams like a regular seam, and you'll see the seams on the inside of the suit. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to go ahead and lay out the fabric and get everything cut out, and I'm going to speed that part of the video up for you. Alright, so now that everything is cut, we can actually start constructing this. So I'm going to start with the front pouch, and I can kind of remove these other pieces from the table. So for the front pouch, we're actually going to sew all the pieces together along the center front line. And I'm going to make sure that I have both my pieces, they're face sides together or right sides together. I tend to say face side. And that this center line here is all lined up for each piece. Now we have to find which is the face side. Sometimes if you stretch it a little bit and you see the little lines going up and down, that's the face side. So the side with a little bit more texture is the wrong side. Or if you can kind of see how the edges are starting to curl up this way, that is usually an indication of the face side. So this is my face side, the face side here, and I'm getting all my notches here in the center front along here lined up. And then I'm going to lay the lining right on top of that, getting that outer edge nice and flush. And then I'm just going to take a few pins around here to pin this together. Now, if you're new to working with swim fabrics, you will want to know, or you will find out, that they are very slippery. And so they like to slip around on you and change position as you're working. So I'm just going to put a pin here, going in the direction of the sewing. And if you put your pin 3/4 of an inch to an inch away from that sewn edge, you won't have to remove them as you sew. So I'm just kind of realigning this up to this edge. One down here at this edge. Just check on the other side. That looks pretty well together. I may be able to line that up a little bit better on this side. One of the things that you want to make sure, because there's only a 1/4 inch seam allowance, that when you're going into sewing in the machine, that all those layers are getting sewn with the stitch with enough in there so that it doesn't pull out. So this is nicely pinned together, so we're going to use the serger, and we're just going to sew all the way around this outer edge. And then we'll be right back here for the next step. Okay, so the front pouch is all sewn, so I'm going to turn it face sides out. Just fold the lining over the front pouch and then turn it face side out, okay? So there's the fabric, the outside, and this is the lined inside. So let's just set this aside right now. So let's just look at it like that. You're used to seeing it. This is the edge here that we're going to sew into the front. And I'm going to grab the front right now. And we're going to look to find out which is the face side. Again, look for the straight lines up and down. On this side, you can't see it. I know you can't see it in the camera, but it looks kind of fuzzy. But on this side, when I stretch it a little bit, I can see definite straight lines. So this is going to be our face side. So we see notches here, and I got notches on this part here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to match those notches. I'm going to pin this right on those notches. Now you will probably have to stretch just slightly to get this to fit in, because you're sewing a concave into a convex, which is two different curves, two different opposing curves. So you may have to do that just a little bit, which is going to be just fine. It will help keep that area nice and snug in that area, but you want to make sure that your cut edges are flush with each other. So on this edge here, this point where they disappear on each other, that is your seam allowance. That's the 1/4 inch. I'll put a pin there, and I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Flush edges, and you see that point where they disappear, the edges disappear on the side, and I'm just going to pin that. Now, as you see, it is a curve, so you will probably need to just kind of stretch just slightly while you're in the machine to get that to work in on each of the edges. But now I'm going to actually pull this out a little bit so we can work with it a little bit neater. So remember, I said that I'm going to enclose all the seams, so I need to actually do that. So how am I going to do that? So let me fold this out so you can kind of see what this looks like. So basically, this piece needs to come up to the front. And in order for that to come up to the front, I actually have to sew it to this side. So I'm sewing my lining. You probably can't see that because I just turned it. So if I lay this like this and lie that right on top, this seam will fold up toward the top. And what this is going to do, this seam, if it were sewn, is going to fold over and it's going to look like that. So nice and flush. So if I just pin that there, okay, and if I fold that over, then you'll see all of the raw edges. All right, so that's what I'm going to do. Is I'm going to actually flip this over so I can see it better while I'm pinning it, and I'm going to match this lining, these lining notches, to where I just pinned. So you saw me just pin this one together. So I'm going to grab the lining, make sure that your face side is toward the garment. I'm going to match this notch. I'm going to grab that, and instead of pinning it again, I'm just going to reach under here, hold on with my fingers, pull that pin out, and just repin all those layers. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing over here on this edge, right? And then I can reach kind of in here. Be careful not to stretch too much. You don't want to stretch it out. Repinned. Now I'll come over here and I will pin this notch, do the same thing, grab that pin and repin. And follow up with the matching the edges. Okay, so now if you see this, you'll probably have to stretch just a little bit to get all of those curves and everything to fit in without any gatherings along the way. You see this little bit here. As you sew, you're gonna have to work that so it doesn't do a little pucker there as you sew around, but you wanna make sure that you're gonna catch all 4 of these layers. All right, I'm not gonna narrate while I'm sewing, so you'll just have to look very detail oriented to see how I catch all the 4 layers. All right, and then when we're done, just to show you, everything will lay correct. That's gonna be the outside. And then the inside, this seam will all be enclosed. Okay, so all we need to do is go over to the serger and get this all sewn together. And then we'll be right back here. All right, so now we've got the pouch sewn onto the upper body, and I'm just going to pull out, see, this is what it looks like, and I'm going to turn this over so I see the inside, and I'm just gonna fold the lining piece up to the top. And what I'm gonna do is, we're not ready to sew the side seams yet, we're actually going to do the crotch seam next, but I want to just put some pins here to hold this up out of the way. So just pin these together just so everything stays out of the way and nice and flat. All right, so now we'll turn this over. And this is the front with the front pouch. And I'm just gonna push this down a little bit because we're going to work here. This is the crotch, and we're actually going to sew the back crotch to the front crotch. So I'm gonna grab my back piece. And again, we're going to look to see which side is the face side. I think this is the wrong side. I'm seeing the line, so this is the face side. So I'm going to match that to my edges, and there is a slight curve here. Right, we're gonna stretch this into the back. There's just a tiny stretch. It's slightly curved because of the notches that I cut in there. Okay, that's what it's supposed to look like. But again, we are enclosing this. So what we need to do is we actually need to match the lining to this side. So I'm just going to turn this over really quick. And I'm gonna take the back lining, look for the face side. It's hard to tell on the lining. I think this here is the face side. And I'm going to match those notches back up to that edge. And on this side, I'm gonna hold, and I'm gonna grab this pin. I'm just gonna pin those together. This is a rather short seam, so you know, it won't take that long to sew, but you just wanna make sure, especially at this part, at the crotch, that you get all 4 layers in there and they're all secured very well. So everything is pinned together. When this gets sewn, this is actually going to fold up like this, right? So that's the back, and everything will be enclosed here. So I'm just gonna grab this, get this ready to sew. Take this over to the serger, we'll serge right across there, and then we'll be right back here. All right, so we have this crotch seam sewn, and as I pointed out to you while I was sewing, I got really close here, and I think that's just the fabric pulled away. What I would do if I were I would actually go back in here and probably just stitch over here again with a straight stitch machine just in this area. Maybe not right directly on the stitch line, but just a little ways away, just to reinforce that from pulling out. So if that wasn't there, we can go ahead and flip this all to the face side. Okay, so there's the seam there, the crotch seam, and now we have our lining pieces. And of course the front we actually pinned together. So I'm actually going to kind of do that a little bit, but we're actually going to work on the side seams now. So let me just lay this out and get this back kind of lined up to get the lining and the garment fabric all lined up here. Can you see that in the camera? Let me check, yeah. Okay, so because we are gonna be working on the side seams, I'm not gonna pin at the side seam. I'm just gonna pin probably around here in the leg areas, just to keep the fabric together. We are gonna need it loose because we're gonna be kind of sewing it inside out a little bit. Okay, so I'm gonna pull up here. And do the same. Actually, I don't need to. I'm going to just undo these pins. I probably could have left them together. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this so I can see the face side of it. And my lining is kind of sticking with my front, which is good. And now I'm going to fold and match the face side of the back to the face side, right, of the garment. So the face side of the garment fabric to the face side of the garment fabric in the front. And I'm gonna pin, including the lining of the front, I'm gonna pin all of that together. I'm not pinning the back lining. So I'm just gonna pin this to keep it all together for right now. Now, if you're not doing enclosed seams, you can just match all the seams up, including the lining, together and just sew the seam. So I don't want the line, but because I am doing enclosed seams, I'm only doing the garment fabric and the front lining. So there'll be 3 layers. Get those 2 all pinned. Okay. Okay, so now I have this piece of the lining, which I'm going to just kind of fold down like this. And with that, I'm gonna flip this whole thing over. Okay, so now I see the inside of the front. And remember, I folded that lining. I'm gonna fold this up so I see the back of the lining. And I'm gonna fold that lining, which is now the face side, and I'm gonna match it here up at the side seam. I'll reach in there. Oh, I just need the pin that's holding it together. And now I can pin all 4 layers together. And match this side up, right? Again, see, I'm folding the back from the other side over on top of the lining. Grab that pin. All right, and that's all there is to it. So now all I need to do is sew my side seams, all 4 layers together, and then we'll be right back here. Okay, so we have the side seam sewn. I'm going to clip off these extra threads. And then I'm going to carefully turn this right side out, face side out, right? So this is the lining. If we flip this over, this is the back and this is the lining. And then if I turn it all the way right side out, then we have our suit. And you can see here, I'll just flip this inside again. All of the seams now are fully enclosed, which makes a really nice suit. And on any kind of high-end swimsuit, you would find all of the seams enclosed. Now, I have these pins here, and what I'm gonna do is I'm actually probably going to, I keep turning this inside out and back and forth and everything, turn it inside out for you. What I'm gonna do is I'm actually just going to pin all the way around. What I'm gonna do is take this over to the straight stitch machine, the sewing machine, and do a long basting stitch all the way around just to hold the lining in place. And that's okay, even though it doesn't stretch, that can be popped out or removed later. So sometimes the places that I worked at in the industry, we did that, and then after the suit was done, we actually popped all those stitches so that people didn't think that they were breaking the suit when they were putting it on. So just a few of the stitches will need to be popped just so you don't get scared that you're breaking any seams there. But we're just gonna do the stay stitching, and that keeps the lining and everything nice and flat all the way around while we're working with the elastics. Okay, so I'm just gonna pin here up at the waist. Now I'm gonna pin here. This is actually the center front right here. I don't have a notch for that, but that's where we need to put the buttonhole if you want to put a buttonhole. I'll go ahead and do that. Some of my other swimsuits I didn't show you that I was putting a buttonhole in there. Some people like the buttonhole for the drawstring, some people don't. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you how to do it again. But I'm going to stay stitch. I'm not going to use the serger, I'm going to use the stay stitch because it's kind of a waste of thread, and also the serger may tend to stretch the fabric out. And we're actually going to be using the serger to actually apply the elastic, and the additional serger stitch would actually create some bulk there, which we don't want. Okay, so I'm probably just going to sew here. It's okay, 1/4 inch away from the edge. Just run the fabric at the edge of the presser foot and that will be fine. We're gonna put 3/8 of an inch elastic on here, so that will definitely be covered. Okay, so I'll do that and then I'll come back and I'll talk about the buttonhole. All right, so we've got the basting stitching all the way around the legs and the waist to keep everything together. So let's actually put the buttonhole in. Now you don't have to put a buttonhole for the drawstring in if you don't want a drawstring, but I'm gonna go ahead and do it for those that would like to do this. So one thing that we need to remember is that we're using 3/4 inch elastic. So we cannot go beyond the 3/4 inch at the edge of the waist. So let's find the center of the front. So I'm just gonna fold this in half at the side seam, and I will put a pin here at the halfway mark. This will be our center front. Now what I'm gonna do, from the edge, I'm gonna measure down, and I'm gonna put a pin where that 3/4 inch is. So since we're using 3/4 inch elastic, that's what the pattern is built for. It's going to be turned over this way. So on the inside, this is the area we have to put the buttonhole in. So I'm just going to keep this pinned while I go over to the sewing machine to actually get it in to the machine, and then I'll remove the pins when I actually sew. Now, because this is swimwear fabric, it's stretchy, it's very stretchy, the machine is going to have a hard time sewing with it. It's also slippery. So what I do is I put a piece of cotton muslin, good weight, a medium weight, and I put it underneath. And then I sew the buttonhole, and then I cut the excess off. And what that does is underneath, it helps the feed dogs pull the fabric through the machine. Now the machine is going to be going back and forth, or front to back, because it's going to sew down one side and then back up the other. So you will probably need to help your machine through. I don't know all of the different machines how your buttonholes work, so make sure that you understand how your buttonholer works on your machine. So mine has an attachment for the foot. I select the buttonhole, I select the button size, and then I hit the presser foot and it just automatically makes the buttonhole. So, but I still kind of have to help it through because of the type of fabric. So now that I've got everything ready, I'm gonna go put the buttonhole in the machine. All right, so we've got the buttonhole on. I'm just gonna trim this up here. Let's get this thread clip here. And then on the inside, I'm just going to clip off the extra muslin that I used. Be careful not to actually cut the lining fabric. And I'm not going to open the buttonhole just yet. I like to wait to do that until just before I put the drawstring in. All right, that's taken care of. Now, I like to put the leg elastic on before I put the waist elastic on. I can't tell you why, I just prefer to do it that way. I guess because the waist is nice and flat here, it doesn't get in the way while I'm putting the leg elastic on, which can be kind of challenging because I've got some curves here. Now, I've pre-cut the lengths of the elastic that I need, so check on the pattern for your size. Those amounts are suggested amounts, so it's not too snug. So if you like a snugger leg opening, you can, subtract an inch or another inch and a half or 2 inches, and then do it that way. You may try putting the elastic around your leg and then pinning it to see what the length that you like, and you could do it that way. Now I'm going to do this by the quadrant method, which means I'm going to go ahead and make a loop of this, divide this into fourths, and then I'll divide the leg opening into fourths, and then I will match each of those pins to actually get the elastic on. So I'm going to walk you through that method. There's another method where you can just directly put the elastic on. You don't have to measure anything, just go all the way around until you overlap the elastic. You could do it that way as well, but it depends on your comfort level, how tight you like it to be around the leg. So with this method, I'm going to go ahead and move the suit out of the way for right now. So on one of the elastics, we're going to make this a loop. So I'm actually going to overlap each end an inch. So I'll mark an inch on each end, each of the cut ends. And I'm doing this with permanent marker. Of course this is white, so we're probably going to see through it, but that's okay for right now. It's just a small mark. If you're in your actual suit, you may want to use chalk or an erasable pen. So overlap it this way. This is the way I overlap. I know it says overlap an inch. It's actually overlapping it a ½ inch, but this is the way that I've done the measurement, which includes the seam allowance. So with this width of elastic, it's easier to do it this way. So match each of the raw edges to your mark. And I'll just put a pin in that for right now. And I actually forgot to mention what type of elastic I'm using. And I'll set that down, and I just want to show you. So I'm using the 3/8 inch cotton swimwear elastic. I really like this elastic for swimwear. The cotton holds up really well. It washes actually really well, and it's really not that restrictive. It's kind of soft. So also the pattern is built for 3/8 inch elastic. So if you are using 1/4 inch elastic, for instance, it's going to be a little bit taller in the lengths. Okay, so 3/8 inch elastic. Okay, so now this is actually pinned together. I'm going to actually sew this together in the machine really quick, and then I'll come right back here and we'll divide everything into fourths. Okay, so I've got my loops already. So now I'm going to divide these in fourths, and I'm just going to fold it here at one of the edges of the where I sewed them together. And I'll put a pin here. And then I will fold everything softly all the way to the other end. Don't stretch it. And then I'll put another pin here. Now, of course, you could mark this with an erasable pen or chalk or something like that as well. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take those two pins, I'm going to match those two pins together, and I'll put a pin on both sides of the end, at each end. Okay, so I'll do the other one off camera. So I'm just going to do one leg opening for you. It'd be the same for the other. So now I need to divide the leg opening into fourths. And before, I'm not going to start at the side seam. I'm actually going to start where I want to actually put this seam here, where I overlap the elastics. And where I kind of want it to be is a little bit offset from the side seam, so there's not so much bulk. So I'll come in maybe 1 inch, and this is where I kind of want to set that. So this is the point where I will fold the leg opening, and I'm going to do this in half. Now notice that I've got this big round area. This is where the buttocks are. So what I have to do, I'm actually going to put a pin at the starting point. And then I'm going to very carefully match the raw edges, even though it's a curve. Don't stretch it, just carefully massage that, each of the raw edges to match the raw edge, because we want it to be exactly in half. And that's the actual circumference measurement, or perimeter measurement. So very carefully around the edge, and it almost matches that crotch seam, but I've got a little extra here, so I'm going to put a pin right here. Okay, so now I've got a pin where I wanted to start, where I want to put that bulk, and then I have a pin down here, that's half. Now I'm going to match those pins up together, and then I'll do the same thing. I will very carefully match the edges, walk the edges along with each other. And I'll put a pin where the fold is. And then I'm going to do the same exact thing on the other side. Match those raw edges, walk them very carefully up to the next point. Put a pin in the folded edge. All right, let's lay this out again. So now I have 4 pins, right, on my leg gun. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now all I have to do is match the pins on my elastic to the pins on the garment. And we're going to put this on the inside. So this is my starting point. This is where I wanted that bulky part of the elastic to go. So I'm going to put this here, and I'm actually going to do this from the inside because this is where I want to actually sew. So I'm going to actually use the pins on my elastic, and I'll just pin it to the garment. Pin it pretty securely. Then I will match the next pin, and then I'll pin that in place. And so on all the way around until you match all of the pins. And here's the last one. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove the other pins so I don't forget anything. I'm going to take this over to the serger, and I'm going to serge it on to the garment. Okay, let me actually make sure that's not, okay. Lay this out for you so you can see this. All right, so the elastic is all pinned on, and you can see here what we're going to be doing is we're going to stretch the elastic to match the size of that opening part. All right, and it may seem like there's more around here, but that's because there's a curve, rather an outward curve for more fabric. So we're going to make sure we overlock the elastic to the edge, but we're going to be stretching the elastic as we sew. All right, so let's go over to the serger and get this started. And we're going to start here. One more thing, we're going to start here where the bulky elastic is, and then we'll do the serging all the way around from that point. Okay, so let's go over to the serger. All right, so we've got the elastic on our leg openings. Now what we need to do is we need to actually turn the elastic over. So basically we're just turning this into the inside, but we want to make sure that when we turn it that we feel the edge of the elastic, and we're turning it over at that point. And we're actually going to be sewing, we're going to be doing this with a zigzag stitch, so I can pin it from the inside. Now if you're using a cover stitch, you'll be actually stitching on the face side of the fabric, so you'll have to put your pins on the top, but I'm going to be using a zigzag stitch. So especially in these really stretchy areas, you'll probably have to stretch the elastic, feel for where the edge of the elastic is, and then turn it over. Now I don't normally pin this when I do it, I just kind of turn it over, feel and turn it over as I'm in the machine. But I thought I would just go ahead and pin this all the way around so that you can see it done. Okay. The reason I don't like to do a lot of pinning on knits is because sometimes you will get holes. And if you get a hole or you break the yarn in the knit, then it sometimes will unravel. So, but I'll do this so you can actually see what you're supposed to do. And again, I'm just rolling right at the edge of the elastic. Takes a little bit of handwork. We're almost there. All right, maybe I'll just put one right here. This is where all the thickness of the elastic was. This is where we kind of want to start. Okay, I'll just do the one leg. That's all you need to see. The other leg is exactly the same. Okay, well, it's kind of pinned. It kind of looks weird right now, but once we get that stitched in, and again, you're gonna have to stretch this. So we'll stretch this back to its regular size and as we stitch around. All right, so let's go. And I'm gonna be using the same zigzag stitch I've used in other videos. 4mm by 4mm, that's 4mm wide and 4mm long. Okay, so we got the elastic and the leg all done, and that looks really nice. Now, if you prefer something that looks a little bit more fancy than the zigzag, you could try a 3-step zigzag, which would hold on to it a little bit better. Of course, it takes a little bit longer to sew. And of course, you could also do a cover stitch if you have that machine. So now let's get ready to do our waistband. And I'm gonna set this over here for right now. So I have my elastic here, and we're using 3/4 inch wide elastic. That's what the pattern is built for. If you want to use something wider, just be aware that if you say you want to use 1 inch and you don't correct the pattern, that your height of the suit will be off by at least 1/4 inch in height. So if you want to use 1 inch, then add 1/4 inch just around where the top of the waistline is. So I'm using 3/4 inch, and I have cut the suggested size. Look on the pattern, the suggested amounts to cut are there. Now if you want something that's a little bit snugger, you could of course cut something shorter. Of course you can't cut it longer than the actual waist is already there. So, but if you want something to fit a little bit snug and you don't like the amount that I gave, then of course you can make it a little bit smaller for your comfortability. So I'm going to put this together just like I did the leg openings, and we're going to divide everything into fourths. So I'm going to mark each of the cut ends of my elastic, actually one half inch, a half inch. It always sounds weird when I say 1/2 inch. So a half inch on either side, we're going to overlap it. We're actually going to use these marks, and this time I'm using my erasable pen so that it goes away, because it's hard for me to remember which side I'm going to put this on, if it's going to show or not. So this will go away with the heat, so we don't have to worry about it after it's washed. So then I've got my two ends. Make sure that you don't twist it. Overlap them and line up those marks right on top of each other. This is a little bit different than the leg. I know we matched the edge to the mark on the leg, but in this instance, since this is going to be completely on the inside, we're just going to match those marks right on top of each other. And I'll pin it, and I'm just going to use the sewing machine really quick to sew right down that line. Okay, so now I've got my ring, my elastic ring, and I'm gonna fold this in fourths just like I did for the leg opening elastic. Now I could use my erasable pen, but I'm gonna use pins so that you can actually visualize it. So I'm just gonna fold this in half very carefully, and then I'm gonna mark the folded end. And then I'm gonna match this pin to my sewn seam here. And then I'm going to put a pin on either end. Okay, so now I have 4 pins, or I have 3 pins and then my actual seam. So I can set this aside, and I'm going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to divide this in fourths. The way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to match these side seams. So match the side seams, and then I will put a pin here at that fold. That's the center front. And then again, holding those side seams, and gently fold to the back, and I'm going to put a pin here. Then I need to match the center front pin and the center back pin. And the reason I need to do that is because I made the front slightly smaller than the back. So the side seams are not necessarily 1/4 of the waistband. So match your center front and your center back pins. Gently fold till you get to the creased edge and put a pin here. And then repeat the process on the opposite side. All right, so now I have 4 pins, my center front, my center back, and my two side pins. Now I can start matching all of the marks, the pins in the mark, and the sewn edge to the garment. So I'm going to match the sewn elastic edge to the center back pin. So right up here, let me turn this a little bit, it'll be easier for me to do this. So I'm going to match it right here, right up to the edge, and I'll pin that in place. And I'm pinning on the elastic, this is on the inside of the garment, because this is the side I'm going to use the overlock on. And then open this up, and I just need to follow along and match each pin to the pin, matching the edge of the fabric. Be careful that you don't get any twists in the elastic. Otherwise, you'll be frustrated when you try to sew it on and you get to a part that won't turn. All right, that was the last pin. Okay, so now I'm going to actually remove all of my center, front, and side pins. Okay, and the elastic is still pinned in there. So now all I need to do is overlock this together, and I'm going to run over there and serge the elastic to the waist. All right, so I've got the elastic serged onto the waistband. All we need to do is turn the elastic over into the inside and zigzag that down. And I'm doing this exactly the way I did the leg elastic. When you turn it over, you want to make sure that you're flush with the edge of the elastic. Makes it nice and snug. So I'm going to use the same length and width zigzag stitch. To me, it's important to have a cohesive look on the suit, so the same size zigzag stitch everywhere. All right, and we'll probably need to just stretch just a tiny bit as we sew that zigzag stitch on. Make sure that your lining in here does not get rumpled up. All right, so now I'm ready to do that zigzag stitch. All right, so we're almost done. We've got the elastic on the waist, the elastic on the leg, and now all we need to do is put the drawstring in. So I'm going to turn this inside out so we can see where this buttonhole is. So remember the buttonhole we put in here. So the way I like to get these started is just by using a seam ripper, because I can poke a hole into the fabric. Just be very careful that you don't get the elastic and that you tear a hole in the elastic. And poke through, and then remember that you have a layer of muslin in there as well. You can kind of pull it apart to see if you've got in there. And then I'm just going to take my snips to clip some more to get this buttonhole open. Now we'll have to look and see if I've got it. Nope, I'm not through. There we go. Nope, I wasn't through the muslin. So now I'm through the muslin. Now don't clip beyond the bars of your buttonhole, right? So that's what we want. So that's all ready. Now the drawstring, I have suggested drawstring amounts. So basically my suggested amounts are 10 inches longer than the waist measurement, and so that way when it's relaxed you have approximately 5 inches on either side to tie a knot. So and that's what we're going to do now. So I have this drawstring. You can use anything, a shoelace, or I've used paracord before as well. So what I like to do on this, I'm just going to tie a knot on one end, and I'm just going to trim it off a little bit, but not too close because we don't want it to unravel. And then I'm using a big safety pin. I pierce that knot. So pierce the knot, not your finger. I've done that several times. All right, so this is securely on the safety pin, and then I'm just gonna stick it here through that buttonhole and then feed it through the inside of that waistband on the inside. And then you'll just have to push the fabric along the safety pin. So push the fabric along the safety pin, hold it, and then with your other hand pull the fabric away from the safety pin. So we'll just wiggle it all the way around. Now when it comes back out the other side, you'll have to continue to push the fabric around. You'll have to continue to pull your drawstring out and then hold onto that drawstring at the beginning and then work that fabric around the drawstring until basically what you want your drawstrings to be about the same size. You want enough that's going to give you enough to tie a knot. The kind of knot that you can untie. So I'll do a little bit more here. I think I may have cut my drawstring a little bit extra long. That looks long enough. So I'm going to cut my other part of the drawstring off, tie a knot there, and then I will take the safety pin off of this side. These are about the same size, and then I can tie a knot. And then I'll turn this inside out. And we have finished the flat front pouch swim bikini. There's the back and there's the front.